after quite a short break, after a few days of intense programming. So to start with the day, today we will be presenting, spending some time reflecting on the work that we have been doing over the last few days, and this brings an end to the educator and artist-led presentations before we have Ita Merotra from ArtReach as well. We will be speaking to you further about developing your modules around case studies that you have been presented with. And each group would be choosing one to focus on, from where we will set you up with some questions to start off with. To give you a small recap of Saturday's session, taking forward the learner-centered themes outlined on day 2, our sessions on day 3 began questioning what it means to have a learner-centered approach implemented in and across teaching strategies and classrooms. Our first session with Rama Matthew demonstrated the inherent meanings, structures, systems, examples, and key concepts associated with LCA, presenting a much more holistic alternative to teacher-centered teaching. With Shilpa Gupta's session, we collectively discussed what it means for an artistic practice to be thought of as a resource. How can we activate artworks for our learners, and what are their generative possibilities? Our last session for the day was with TCLP, the Community Library Project, with a presentation that was led by Prachi Grover and Michael Creighton, where they spoke about the functioning of the library pre-pandemic and in the ways that they were adopting to the virtual world of interaction. They spoke of their challenges and difficulties and how they were hoping for a more community-led support base to continue bringing books and joy to their readers. So now, before we begin, does anyone have any questions for the day? So we'll be starting today with the case study, with our third and final case study, ArtReach, which is led by Ita Merotra, who is here with us today. Ita Merotra is an art educator and an artist invested in non-fiction comics and illustration. She has been associated with ArtReach since 2015 and is currently its director. She has been an artist educator at Akshara Foundation and Art School in 2017. Among her other professional experiences, she works as an illustrator and researcher at Khidki Voice, a quarterly journal supported by Khoj, between 2016 and 17. She was also associated with the early literacy program in rural Rajasthan, leading workshops on comics and bookmaking for rural children in Ajmer in 2015. Just a small introduction to ArtReach before I hand it over to Ita. ArtReach is a charitable trust established in 2015. Their mission is to reach children, young people, and women from marginalized communities across India and transform their lives through art. They work with contemporary and traditional Indian and international artists and partner with NGOs, schools, foundations, and museums. Since 2015, ArtReach has increasingly worked with care homes for children and young people off the streets or from homes that are unable to support them. Their engagements with care homes began with energetic mural painting workshops. An artist or group of artists would work along with children to transform their space over a few days. So thank you, Ita, for joining us today. I'll let you take over.
Thanks, Akanya. It's nice to be back here. And I can see Saturday was very exciting with all these kind of artist-led talks. So thanks for the introduction to ArtReach. I'm just going to add to that. So that's what we do, exactly bringing artists to spaces where there isn't access to leave alone creative learning, but often even good education or skill development. So it's working with children, young people, as well as women within both the urban kind of slum, peri-urban environments, and also very remote rural environments. So within a tribal village in central India to our most backward state in the country, which is Bihar. And Bihar has been a very consistent engagement for us, working in partnership with NGOs that are kind of on ground. So we don't have, ArtReach doesn't have its own NGO or like Tara Homes, but similar to the community library space, where we have our team that then partners with and reaches out to other organizations that are either care homes housing their kind of children and young people, or are working on ground within a community space. So over the past 5 years, ArtReach has worked with about 55 such NGOs across the country, and with over 200 artists from within the country, traditional as well as young artists, trained artists from art colleges, older professional artists who worked for over the years in the education space as well as have their own practices, and visiting artists from across the world. So we see ourselves as kind of within this intersection between art and the art world and education and social development. And it's really exciting because we're then getting in our own, as an organization, our learning and our experiences from all these worlds. And sometimes they're quite contradictory. Sometimes they're running in parallel to each other, but there is a lot of potential for them to connect, and for each of these ends to learn from the other. So it is the partnerships that then happen between an artist coming in for a particular program in a particular space is in its experience and its unfolding mutually a learning experience that artist is able to grow a lot within that year. And it's often when it's a longer program, if it's a teaching program, say the one at Tara, it is a fairly young artist, maybe with a couple of years of experience after a master's in visual art or design, and for them in being interested in growing their pedagogic expertise, for them to go through that 1 year is as much of a learning experience as it is for the children that the artist is interacting with. And ArtReach grows with each program because there isn't a guidebook for us to kind of adhere to, or an organization doing exactly the same thing. So we look at ourselves as constantly growing. But that said, we do have structures in place of the kinds of programs, and we kind of club them under 3 umbrella kind of types of programs at the moment. One is kind of shorter, very intensive 3-day, 4-day production-ended programs. So when I say that, I mean that when we go in for one of these intensives, then we're saying right on the onset that within this period of time, we're going to end up with a big mural, for instance. Okay, and when these kind of short programs are really exciting, especially when it's a new organization approaching us and saying, hey, we want an artist to come in and work with the young people. Government schools often within Delhi and even in Bihar have called us in to do this. And if you've been to a government school especially in the outskirts of Delhi or rural India, you know how dismal it is, and how much in need of transforming the environment of that space it is in. So these programs, these short-term programs, are a good way to have a first exchange with a new organization. They're high energy, really spirited, and you end up with something that's created very much by participating young people, children of that school or community space. So it's also a big marker of those participants owning the space that they're in. Right. So you every day you're walking into that school, you're seeing this large wall that you've transformed of that space. So that's one. As a production ended kind of module, and also one that's a way for us to access new spaces. The second kind of larger umbrella under which we lead programs is teaching programs. And those are, unlike the intensives, they're much more process driven. They're also skill driven. And teaching programs are mostly with the so intensives. When we go in for 3 days to a care home or a government schools, we're open to working with any age group. We're open to working with a mixed age group, which is very nice often. So it's from like, even if it's a care home, then we work with everyone in that care home, up to like 50 children, young people, and they can be like 3-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And it's really exciting because they come together on a wall and they decide, often led by height, who's going to do what. So that's really cool because it's a new way for the whole home to do something together. But when it's teaching programs, it's usually 11, 12 and above. And sometimes the others in a care home space like Tara would come in, would get involved. Younger children might want to also sit and get involved within that process. But we do say that this is, so if you're leading a 1-year teaching program with a care home, we do decide who are the 20 participants. And 20 is a number that we often work with. So, so far it's been with about 15 centers of 5 large care homes. And the year-long programs. And with each of them, it's 20 young people between 12 to 18, girls and boys. And we work for really long days. So it's starting from 10 a.m. to about 5 p.m. over the course of about 10 months through weekend workshops. Right, so we're not going, they're school going, they're doing their week of everything else, and then we meet on the weekends. We go into the care home space to lead these. So before a teaching program of this kind of length and duration starts, it means us and the selected artist who's going in with us really learning what the needs of that space are, what is the nature of that space, how big is it, where is it located, what are the things around that space, and also just knowing what the like the tech is, what is it that the staff in the space are going to be able to help us with, all of that. And then there are these kind of long programs that happen. After the teaching programs, the alumni of those programs actually are able to continue working with ArtReach to reach internships and one-to-one mentorships with artists if they wish to continue, because after that 1 year, so with Tara, after the year of working with 20 young people, we're at this point where they're like, okay, now we have these skills and now we want to know what to do with them. You know, we've gone through a rigorous foundation year. We've discovered that art isn't just drawing and making pretty pictures. So what do we do with all this learning? So then we have an alumni program where all these from different care homes come together once a month and interact with a professional, experienced, creative practitioner. So a photographer, a designer, a curator, and think about, understand what it means to take this interest into possibly forming life choices. And so even though it sounds like it's far-fetched for somebody from a care home without any kind of support to be able to go into these creative journeys, it is actually, we found, possible because often schooling isn't going very well either. So the idea that this young person at 18 is, has done super well in their education now and they've been in a care home and they're now going to get a job is actually something we're seeing less and less of. So Tara Homes, for example, is really, they do have smaller numbers and they do support after school as well. But there are many care homes, the larger ones, which are unable to do that and are finding the children are ending up back to the street after having spent 10 years in a care home. So they're ending up back say even in Delhi, after 10 years of a Salam Balak Trust, which is one of our larger care homes, having been there, they end up back in working in a roadside, one of those dhabas, like little canteen. I don't know what a dhaba is in English, but little kind of food stall type thing. And as bonded labor, so absolutely no below minimum wages, no chance of growing at all in what they might have been able to do. So these care home spaces are where we take our teaching programs. And though not all participants of a teaching program are expected to or will continue after the year, there is a possibility to do that. And for example, even just last year, we had 10 young people placed in successful internship mentorships, one-to-one with NGOs, with art organizations, museums, artist studios as interns. And one of them, even during this couple of months, has got a permanent position in a leading design firm. So for her, to see that this one situation is possible means for us that possibility is always there. And if it weren't for lockdown, we had many such internships planned. So that's this kind of larger teaching program, and that's what we take to care homes. That has been what has worked within these spaces where there is basic needs of a young person off the street or whose family can't take care of them being met. And each care home does it to a different degree. There is also counseling if in some of the homes, not all, but that's it. You know, they do struggle immensely with what else is the ways to reach out to these children. How else could a young person grow and be confident enough, whether with just communicating or with feeling that they have the skills to enter the world and find their place within it. The last kind of program is community projects, where there isn't an organization or a school or a already formed collective that we're going to. It's artists saying, we are interacting directly, we have been working directly with this particular community space. We have been, for example, Avinash has been working, he's a Madhubani artist from Madhubani in Bihar, and has been working in rural Jharkhand with this group of women. And I would like to continue that. And this is the kind of things that I would do if I were to continue. And then every year, so these are rolling grants, which every year we give out to a couple of artists to continue their community-driven, artist-led initiatives, which are again very process-driven, not looking at production as in the intensives, or at skill development really as in the teaching programs, but at community building. And what does it mean for a community to grow with an artist, right? So I'm going to come back now again to what we do with the care home space. And that's, I think, what we're interested in here. And what you guys are, I'm really interested in the modules that come up from the workshop for care homes. So going back to that, within the care home space, we've had over 25 artists so far working with different care homes, mostly in and around Delhi, because that's where ArtReach's team is based, and because we look at ourselves not just as making this link of artist to organization, but very closely facilitating the artist in their working within the care home. So for example, when Tehseen was selected to work with Tara Homes, it meant for one of me or my team to be with Tehseen for almost all his workshops at Tara Homes. And the why that's needed is not because that artist needs to learn from us at all. It's because there is this element of interaction and experience that we have from having been in the situation of working with care homes that is already with us. And a lot of the nature of doing and learning how to work in the space is from having done it before. It's really hard for me to be able to explain to an artist who's coming to us, even though we go through many interactions before getting into the space, what it will mean to work there. What are the problems that a young person who's faced years and years of abuse and trauma, what are the problems that that's going to bring up during a workshop where you're looking at, for example, what will you be in 20 years? Let's draw that out. And so, for example, even at Tara Homes, that very exercise of imagine yourself after 20 years, something that to any of us might sound very positive and might open up the ability to draw dreams and associate words of the future that you reflect on as very positively, could lead to the absolute opposite happening within the care home space. So with that very exercise, we had two young boys flip into this kind of state of real depression around this idea, and go into this sense of like if after 20 years, I'm 14 now, 34 after 20 years, that's right, yeah. 34 after 20 years, that's the age when my father did this, and that's the age when this person I know was dead. And it was an absolutely vicious circle of reflecting on really sad and traumatic things that have happened in this very young person's experience already. So what do we do in points like this, right? And that's a very kind of extreme thing that happened, and it led to various ways of approaching that, which I could go into also, but and which often involves going back to the care home staff and approaching them, because we do, as Anurupa was also saying, we do draw the line between ourselves as creative people, as having the expertise in art and not in counseling. But yeah, so all of this is only possible to understand when one is in the space, and is therefore it's really good to have us there when the artist is within the space, at least for the first few workshops. So we do that very much. Now during lockdown, just to kind of get into that, we have been engaging with all the care homes that we have so far been in touch with. Initially, we didn't know how it would work to bring the kind of workshops we do offline, swing that online. And that's really not what we've done. It's to actually make modules that tap into the world of videos, museum collections, artists, kind of their own websites that show what artist work is, artist work has been, which are already available to us online, and then shape activities around that don't require us that much to be physically present. So that's actually worked really well over the past few months, and we've had over 90 workshops. And right now I'm just going to share my screen and show you some of these images and talk around that to get a better look at what we've done online. Yeah, can you see my screen? Yeah, cool. Yeah. So this is an image to just show you what it means for these young people in the care home. This is Karmar Care Home, which is located just outside Delhi in a beautiful kind of fields rolling all around the home. And then they have this one small computer room space. This is actually really good because it's at least a big computer. Sometimes it's been a coordinator's smartphone, which is just really like we're holding our heads by the end of that workshop, because the kids are super interested and you can see how they're crowding around the smartphone. But a smartphone is tiny. We're not being able to show images properly. They're not being able to look at them properly. So the workshops are not often ideal there are many tech problems that come up. We often have to change timings because there's suddenly no power in the care home and there's definitely no inverters. So there are a lot of challenges in these online workshops. They're not smooth. But that said and done, they're very rewarding, and we know from both the staff of the care homes and the participants themselves that they're waiting for the next workshop. These are spaces, it's opening out space. So that's another way that I understand what happens when we take in creative workshops to these spaces, is that there isn't enough space for young people physically even to do the things that they like to do. But when you have the possibility to work creatively, you can open space out where that space may not physically exist. And that is very interesting in how it happens for individual participants in there being able to open out space where there is limited possibility of it. I was talking last time also, I think I mentioned about this thing of there not being much material around. So it's been really interesting to see how every artist in the lockdown period as well, there's been over 10 artists working with us through workshops. And each artist, we've kind of worked around this idea of like, what do you do when there isn't the material that you'd usually be working with? So this is one, again, at this care home itself, Karmark, which is sort of rural. There's a lot of like these open fields, and this artist said, I'm just going to work with mud and use mud as my material to paint with. So that in itself was extremely playful as a way of saying, okay, we're just going to go outside. All we need is computer sheets, some brushes, and we have all this mud, and that's it. And the possibility of using this creative thinking of absence of material has led to such beautiful experiments and results, which also can continue post these workshops, right? There is all this material that's endlessly there. The second bit of what's happened during the lockdown is a lot of talk, interact with children coming out with the fact that they are feeling cooped up, that they know that they're missing out on education, that they are feeling angry and sad. And the thing is that even though none of us look at ourselves as counselors, the possibility, I think, is there in being able to heal in even just expressing and thinking through that. Maybe not always, and every time, when sometimes we do go back to the home and say, this is one child who possibly, has been bringing this up again and again in workshops, and maybe you can, think of what to do, and you have your counselors. But very often it leads to a process of being able to reflect and heal through that creative process. And I think that's there as well. Not always, but that is possible. So a lot of, again, you can see the material is very basic. It's looking at newspapers, collaging, picking up whatever's around, and looking also at elements of magazines and newspapers, cutting and creating something new. So collage is another one that we've gone into a lot, also because you can like pick up scrap from elements from around. Another bit of it is, what do you do with the narrative of your life right now? And because there's such a break in that narrative, especially for children cooped up in a care home where they're not being allowed to go out at all because of the risk of infection, what do you frame? How do you look at the narrative now? Can you tell a story of your everyday? What does that story look like? So bringing in storytelling through comics, through illustration, that's been another whole kind of series of workshops where it's very mundane things, but they're so honestly told that even for them to reflect on it and to look at the drawings they make of their everyday is a really interesting process of forming that narrative of the new, strange kind of experience that's been going through. So I look at that as an important bit. Looking at a lot of artist collections and then forming your individual interpretations. And looking is something that we can come all together on, because there isn't the possibility of being in a physical space together. When we're all looking at the same image, at least for that period of time, we all know we're doing the same thing. So it has been really interesting to have these images up, and we often wouldn't do that when we're physically present. We don't put up a PPT or a computer and stare at artists' work. But it has been interesting to look at also histories around that period, then open up geographies of where the artist is from, and then make this very meditative kind of art work around it. This idea of reflecting on spending more time with yourself has been happening for young people through our workshops as well, because it is again more time with that same group that they've ever spent, and also with us. There are smaller groups because now it's one care home at a time. There's about 10 children max, where they earlier would be about 35. So being able to just do these reflective, meditative, and they're also spending a lot more time with us. Like earlier workshop would be 2 hours, now it's much longer actually. And this,
Yeah,
yeah.
I hate to interrupt you right now, but we're actually running a little bit low on time.
Cool. So that's kind of it. So this is what we're doing with care homes. So the little video I have of a musician who worked with us to come into a care home and connect between drawing and music, which has also been interesting. So I just want to say that through these workshops during lockdown, there's actually been a lot more imagination of what to do that wasn't there in many ways earlier. So it's opened out many things for us. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I've gone over time.
No, that's totally fine. No, maybe we can open up to a couple of questions as well, and then we can just let maybe we can just let people just use the chat box to keep putting in questions if there are more, but maybe you could just address a couple before we kind of move into the next section as well. Thank you so much, Ita.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were just thinking of, also sharing Ita and ArtReach's work and Tara Home together, because it's one of the care homes that they work in, and just trying to see it from the perspective of Ita, who's actually kind of thinking about the art programs, working with the educators, and the perspective of the care home facilitator like Vasanti. So yeah, any thoughts, anything that comes to mind? Silent.
So I just want to say something.
Yeah.
Actually, it is beautiful the way it's working. But something I want to share. We are doing workshop for art. But what is next? They should not go back to the same place. The way she was saying, after 10 years of practicing or doing, they are going to back. Actually, the experience I have in teaching and other experience. So I want to say that the student or child should not go back to the same place, and the plan can be alternative. We are thinking what they want to do after 20 years. So we can have plan that their place where they can be at after 20 years, where they can be, and backward planning they're required. We have to think of what we can plan where they can be after 20 years. So there should be a backward plan, and their vocational art can be there, like weaving, carpentry, cycling, electrical, and wall painting, stencil art. Something there should be there so that they can do after leaving the space, or they can channelize how they can do, or they can grow. The branch should be open, not a and the artwork they're learning, they should have to reach with a large market, not a very limited growth with a single line art they are doing. if they are doing something, one art style or watercolor or acrylic paint, what they're learning and how they can grow to the large space or large market area. They should not live at the same time after a few months or after 1 year. They should not live. They should have to be live with that, and they should have to do after 20 years. They should have to be there something with profession, so they can do with something. Actually, the plan should have to be backward, where we can see them after 20 years.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's definitely something that we are thinking about at ArtReach. And at one level, I don't think that every young person who's going through, say, between the age of 14 to 18 through one of our programs has to end up within a creative field. The care home is also looking at various other opportunities and skill development for them. So they could be young people who discover, more about themselves and abilities to communicate through drawing, but end up as a school teacher of science and math. And even then, that 1 year would have been a really exciting experience that means something for them for their life. At the other level, I totally agree with you. If there is somebody who definitely wants to continue, and because even though they're 15, 16, they're often very decisive about what they'd like to do. Having gone through so many experiences in life, they're maturer than I was at 15 or 16. So they do respond, and they do have really thought out answers for what they'd like to do. So the ones who are interested in pursuing and growing in their creative interests and talents, for them, it is definitely a need to explore more of what it means, even, through these, through getting a job, through learning a skill that would place them in a workshop environment, whether it's, working with a framer, a photographer, and that is something we're going towards with the art room. So it is a slow process, because also it doesn't mean just getting into that job. It means actually seeing what, if, for example, an artist takes in one of these children from a care home to work in their studio as an assistant, then it means that we need to actually facilitate that process, because this young person, when they go out into that environment of working, have a lot of needs which are not, which anybody from a public school or, having gone through the usual life might have. They often don't fit into those structures. They need the help of a counselor from their home. They need somebody who they can trust, already have a relationship with them. So it does this logistically, to put that out there. It means that we, as a small team, are only so far being able to do that one-to-one mentorship and facilitating the transition from learning to actually being an intern to a small scale. I think that there are NGOs who do it at scale and do it for many children and young people in a year, and that's amazing. I think when you work at scale with, say, hundreds of government school children to give them skills and actually see the transition, that is being done by NGOs as well. And at ArtReach, we do that at a much smaller, intensive level. So yeah, I completely take on board what you're saying. Though not, I don't think every young person has to go into a creative field. Yeah. So we're always actually looking out for more and more artist studios, professionals who want to, who also we think would be able to nurture that young person. So that's the only bit that we have to understand with the care home environment. It's not just a government school child who doesn't have opportunity. It's a child who doesn't have opportunity, plus has this baggage of trauma, plus has been on the street, and therefore will need. And the care home space, even though it's really nurturing and they're really good for children, they're also very, in a way, a bubble, no? Where the young person in a care home has not seen their older siblings or mother or father going to work every day and earning money and knowing at all what the working world is. So they actually, at 18, like when we place them into internships, and the one who also got a job, she has no idea how to manage or what to do with money and how to rent a space or any of these things that are you usually pick up. Like we take for granted how much we pick up of the working world being in the usual normal world. So there's a lot that has to go into figuring out how, and it's possible. It's definitely possible. But yeah.
So there's a question from Nikita as well. In the alumni program, do you also share and help students to apply to art schools if they're interested?
Yes, so that's definitely, so right now there was 3 young people who was going to sit for admissions, and thanks for bringing that up because that is an important part of the art room. So far there's been 2. There's one who went to NIFT and is now a designer, and from Udayan Care Homes, and one from Karmat, from the home that I was showing you the image of. He went to art college in Meerut and is now a mural artist. And he actually got interested in art from one of those little intensive mural making intensives that ArtReach does at Karmat before our 1-year engagement with them. So that was like 5 years ago. We went in for a mural, and he got like, he was just came alive to that. And the artist who did the mural painting, he had come down from the UK. That artist and this young person were in touch together much more than we were involved. So that often happens, is the artist being directly in touch with, and after we know that this is a whole, is working, it's something we can trust, we leave them in touch. So this UK-based artist helped the young person from Karmat to go through that entire 5 years of 5 or 6 years of his BFA, MFA. And now he's a muralist. So again, small scale, but yeah, something we look at, and it's increasing. So every year it is more and more. There are Sonam Chaturvedi, who led one of our programs, has come on board to do this, to actually program getting all this alumni stuff to happen. So yeah, every year it's increasing, and it's possible.
There's a further comment from Nikita as well, based on your previous sharing. With the problem you stated earlier, perhaps art management workshops could help them manage their resources when they start earning.
Possibly. Possibly. I do feel that they really like this. You know what Basanti was also bringing up of trust. So I felt that often in the care home space, that when we go in for the first bits, for the first interaction, they're really scoping and testing and really thinking about whether they can trust you. So even especially when they go into a new environment like a working art organization, there is a lot of the approaching spaces with a lot of mistrust often, and only justified by experiences that have happened. So it's really nice for them to come back to somebody they know very well and really trust also, but possibly. Yeah.